Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. So for our honorable lecture, our respected presenters here today, and all the participants, first of all, let me express our gratitude to God Almighty for His blessing so that we are able together in this academic seminar with a good condition. So my name is Halwa Aminah, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation session in Class C, Room A. So today we will have several article presentation from Room A members. The presenter for the sessions are the first one, Firhana Akmalia, the second one, me myself, Halwa Aminah, the third one, Enon, the fourth one, Muhammad Ahsan Ramadhan, the fifth one, Putri Nadin, and the last one will be Marcel, Johan, Maurits, Nanany. Okay, the agenda of this session is designed to provide each presenter with an opportunity to deliver their article presentation in an academic and structured manner. Each presentation will focus on the topic, background, research problem, methodology, findings, and conclusion of the article. Since this session does not include a question and answer segment, I kindly ask all participants to pay close attention during each presentation. So before we begin, allow me to briefly explain the flow of today's session. So first, I will open the seminar. Second, each presenter will deliver the presentation one by one. And after all presenters have completed their presentation, I will summarize the session briefly and close the seminar. So ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, let us begin the first presentation. So the first presenter will be Firhana Akmalia. So to Firhana Akmalia, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you, moderator. First of all, Bismillah, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you for the opportunity given to me to present my research. My article entitled "The Effect of Authentic Reading Materials on Student Vocabulary Learning in EFL Classroom." In this presentation, I will explain the background of the study, the research problem, the literature review, theoretical framework, research methodology, findings, discussions, and finally the conclusion of the study. I hope this presentation will provide a better understanding of how authentic reading materials can contribute to vocabulary learning in English as a foreign language classroom. Now let's begin with the background of the study. Next slide, please. Okay, vocabulary plays a very important role in learning English because it is the foundation of communication. Students need sufficient vocabulary knowledge to understand reading text, follow classroom instruction, participate in a conversation, and express their idea effectively. However, many Indonesian students still face difficulties in mastering English vocabulary. One of the main reasons is the limited exposure to English outside the classroom environment. In addition, English learning often focuses on textbooks and structured exercise, which may not always reflect real language use. As a result, students may remember vocabulary for a short period of time, but they often struggle to use those words in authentic communication. Therefore, teachers need learning research that expose students to real and meaningful language. One possible solution is the use of authentic reading materials. Next slide, please. Based on the background that I have explained, this study focused on one main research problem. The research question is, do authentic reading materials significantly improve the student vocabulary learning in EFL classroom? To answer this question, the study aims to investigate the effect of authentic reading materials on student vocabulary achievement. More specifically, the objective is to determine whether students show improvement in vocabulary learning after being exposed to authentic reading materials during the learning process. The results of this study are expected to provide useful information for English teachers regarding the effectiveness of authentic materials as an alternative learning resource for vocabulary instruction. Next slide, please. Okay, so authentic reading materials are texts that are created for real communication purpose rather than specifically for language teaching. Example include newspaper, magazines, website, blogs, online articles, brochure, or social media content. These materials are commonly used by native speakers in their daily life. According to previous studies, authentic materials provide several benefits for language learners. First, they expose students to natural language that reflect real communication. Second, they increase student motivation because the content is often interesting and relevant to everyday life. And in addition, authentic materials help students understand vocabulary in context instead of memorizing isolate words. Students learn how vocabulary is naturally used in meaningful situations. This can make vocabulary learning more effectively and memorable. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, for the next is literature review. Vocabulary is considered of one of the most essential components of language learning. Without sufficient vocabulary knowledge, students may find it difficult to understand reading passage, listen to spoken language, communicate their ideas, or participate actively in classroom activities. According to Nation, vocabulary learning becomes more effective when learners encounter words in meaningful context rather than learning them sparingly through memorization. Students also need repeat exposure to vocabulary in order to understand meaning, pronunciation, usage, and words form. The more frequently students encounter a word, the more likely they are to remember and use it correctly. Therefore, reading activities are considered highly beneficial because they provide continuous opportunity for learners to meet and participate vocabulary in context. Okay, next please. For the next is theoretical framework. This study is based on Stephen Krashen's input hypothesis, which is one of the most influential theories in second language acquisition. According to Krashen, language acquisition occurs when learners are exposed to comprehensible input. This refers to language that learners can generally understand, even though it contains some unfamiliar words or structures. Christian described this concept as I1 plus, meaning that learners should receive input that is slightly above their current level of proficiency. Authentic reading materials can provide this type of input because they contain realistic and meaningful language. Through continuous exposure to authentic text, students encounter new vocabulary in context and gradually their language knowledge. In this study, authentic reading materials function as the independent variable while student vocabulary learning function as the dependent variable. Next slide. This study employed a pre-experimental research design. More specifically, it used a one-group pre-test, post-test design. This design was selected because it allows the researchers to measure student vocabulary achievement before and after the implementation of the treatment. The participants of this study were 20 students from SMA and Satu Cinangka. The participants were selected using processing sampling because they met the criteria required for this study. To collect the data, the researchers used vocabulary tests as the main instrument. Authentic reading materials were used the treatment during the learning process. The data obtained from the pretest and post-test were then compared to determine whether there was an improvement in student vocabulary achievement. Next slide, please. Okay, the research procedure consists of several stages. The first stage was conducting a pretest. This test was administered to measure the student vocabulary knowledge before receiving the treatment. The second stage was the implementation of authentic reading materials. During this stage, students read various authentic texts and identify unfamiliar words items. They were encouraged to inter infer meanings from context, discuss vocabulary with their peers, and connect new words with the content of the text. The final stage was conducting a post test after the treatment period end, and the purpose of the post test was to measure student vocabulary achievement after learning through authentic reading materials. The collect data were analyzed using descriptive statistics and a paired sample one test. Okay, next. Next slide, please. Okay, the finding of the study revealed that students show noticeable improvement in vocabulary achievement after the implementation of authentic reading materials. The mean score of the post test was 62.5. This score represents the student vocabulary knowledge before receiving the treatment. After several learning sessions using authentic reading materials, the mean score of the post test increased to 78.4. This means there was an improvement of 15.9 points between the pre-test and post-test results. The finding indicate that authentic reading materials can help students improve vocabulary learning in several ways. First, students learn vocabulary through meaningful and realistic context. Student authentic the second, authentic materials tend to increase student motivation and engagement because the topic are often connected to real life situation. And the third is repeat exposure to vocabulary through reading activities helps students remember and return new words and more effectively. Okay, next slide, please. To conclude, to the findings of this study demonstrate that authentic reading materials have a positive effect of student vocabulary learning in EFL classroom. The student mean score increased from 62.5 in the pre-test to 78.4 in the post-test, showing a substantial improvement after the treatment. The statistical analysis also confirmed that the improvement was significant. Based on this finding, it can be concluded that authentic reading materials provide meaningful language exposure, increase student motivation, and support vocabulary retention. Therefore, English teachers are encouraged to integrate authentic reading materials into classroom activities as an effective strategy for improving student vocabulary development and overall language proficiency. Okay, that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention and participation. I hope this presentation has provided useful insight into the role of authentic reading materials in vocabulary learning. I will be very happy for this presentation. Thank you once again and have a nice day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much, Firhana Akmalia, for your exceptional presentation. And the presentation has already introduced the main focus of the article and also delivered the discussion in a structured way. So we do really appreciate your explanation and also the academic effort you have already presented. All right, so next we'll continue to the second presenter, which is myself. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halwa Aminah. And today I will present my article entitled The Relationship Between Sipaling Stigma and Communication Apprehension Among Indonesian EFL Students. So this study focuses on a phenomenon that is quite familiar with the Indonesian student context, especially among students who learn English as a foreign language. And the term Sipaling English is often used to label someone who frequently uses English, sometimes as a joke, but sometimes also with a negative meaning. So through this research, I tried to examine whether this kind of social stigma is related to students' anxiety or fear when communicating in English. Next slide, please. All right, so here are the table of the contents. In this presentation, I will explain several main points. The first one, I will begin with the introduction, including the background of the study, the research gap, and the research question. And after that, I will discuss the literature review and the conceptual framework. And then I will explain the research methodology, data collection, and data analysis. And finally, the last one, I will explain about the results, the discussion and conclusion, and also suggestion for the future research. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, introduction. English speaking is actually one of the most challenging skills for many Indonesian EFL students. In Indonesia itself, English is generally learned in formal classroom settings, but it is not commonly used in everyday life for communication. Because of this, students often have limited opportunities to practice English naturally outside the classroom. So when students are asked to speak English, they may feel nervous, afraid of making mistakes, or worried about being judged by their peers or their friends. So this condition is closely related to communication apprehension, which refers to fear of or anxiety, fear or anxiety in communication situation. And in Indonesian context, this anxiety may become stronger because of the peer judgment. One example is the Sipaling English phenomenon. Students who often speak English may be labeled as showing off or acting superior, or simply trying too hard to look westernized. Even though this label is sometimes used jokingly, it can still create pressure for the students who want to practice their English. So most previous studies have discussed about the speaking anxiety, the self-confidence, and classroom interaction. However, only a few studies have specifically examined the Sipaling stigma as a socio-cultural factor that may influence communication apprehension. So therefore, this study tries to fill that gap. The research questions are: first one, is there any relationship between the stigma, Sipaling English, and the communication apprehension? The second one, to what extent does the stigma influence students' communication apprehension? And the third, how do different levels of perceived stigma related to communication apprehension? Next slide, please. Thank you. So, for the literature review, there are two main concepts in this study. The first is communication apprehension, and according to McCroskey, communication apprehension refers to fear or anxiety related to communication situation. And in the EFL classroom, this can happen when students are asked to speak in front of the class, answer questions, or join discussion, or use English spontaneously. The second concept is the Sipaling English stigma. This term refers to negative peer labeling towards students who frequently use English. And in Indonesia, or Indonesian communities, students who use English may be perceived as arrogant, showing off, or trying to look different from others. So this shows that language use is not only a linguistic art, but also a social act. So this study is also supported by social identity theory and social linguistic perspective. So social identity theory explains that individuals often adjust their behavior to fit into some social group. And in this context, students may avoid speaking English because they do not want to be seen as different from their peers or their friends. Meanwhile, social linguistic perspective shows that language is closely related to identity, social meaning, and group norms. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the conceptual framework, this slide is going to show you the conceptual framework of my study. The independent variable is the sipaling English stigma, and the dependent variable is the communication apprehension. The assumption is that when students perceive a higher level of stigma, they may also experience a greater fear of peer judgment. This fear can lead to higher communication apprehension. In simple terms, students may not only worry about whether their English is correct, but also how their friends will react when they speak in English. And this framework is important because it shows that students reluctant to speak English cannot always be explained by grammar, vocabulary, or pronunciation problems. Because sometimes students may actually understand English, but they avoid to speak because of the social pressure and the fear of negative labeling. Next slide, please. Okay, now it's the research methodology. For this study, I use a quantitative colorational design. This design was chosen because the research aimed to examine the relationship between the two variables without manipulating them. The first variable is the sipaling English stigma and as an independent variable, and the second variable is the communication apprehension as the dependent variable. And the participants of this study were Indonesian university students who were currently learning or using English in academic context. They also needed to be familiar with this stigma, sipaling English phenomenon, and the sampling technique used was purposive sampling, supported by snowball sampling. This means that participants were selected based on specific criteria, and they could also share the questionnaire with other students who matched the criteria. And a total of 32 valid responses were collected and analyzed. Although this number is still limited, the data can provide preliminary insight into how the sipaling English stigma may relate to students' communication apprehension. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So for the data collection and analysis, the data were collected using a structured questionnaire online distributed through Google Forms, and the questionnaire used a 5-point Likert scale, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. It was shared through online platforms such as WhatsApp group, Instagram stories, student communities, and university networks. And the questionnaire consisted of several parts. The first part collected demographic information. The second part measured students' perception of the stigma, such as whether they often hear the term, they feel judged when they speak in English, and whether the stigma makes them hesitant to practice English. The third part measured communication apprehension, including fear of making mistakes and anxiety when speaking in English. And for the analysis, the study used descriptive statistics, including Mayan scores and standard deviation. The statistics were used to describe students' responses and identify which aspect has the highest or lowest level of concern. Since the research is still preliminary, the findings are interpreted descriptively, so for the future research may use coloration or regression analysis to test the relationship more strongly. Next slide, please. Yeah, now it's the result. The result shows several important findings, and the highest mean score was found in the item fear of making mistakes with a mean of 3.72. And this indicates that fear of making mistakes is the strongest concern among the respondents. The second result shows that exposure to the stigma term had a mean of score 3.28. This means that many students are relatively familiar with this expression of their environment. The item fear of being labeled had a mean of score 3.06, which indicates a moderate level of concern. And the last, the stigma discourages practice has the lower mean score, which is 2.72. And this suggests that the stigma does affect some students, but not all students experience it in the same way. Next slide, please. Okay, for the discussion, based on my findings, students are generally familiar with the sipaling English phenomenon. However, the strongest source of speaking anxiety is still fear of making mistakes, and this supports a previous study showing that fear of negative evaluation is one of the main factors in foreign language anxiety. At the same time, peer judgment also disappeared to contribute to students' communication concerns. And the stigma can create social pressure because students may worry that speaking English will make them look arrogant, pretentious, or different from their friends. This shows that communication apprehension is not only influenced by language competence, but also by the social identity and peer acceptance. So the implication is that English teachers and lecturers should not assume that students are silent only because they lack of vocabulary or grammar knowledge. Sometimes students avoid speaking because they are afraid of being laughed at or judged. So therefore, the classroom should be a safe space where students can practice English without a fear or ridicule. Next slide, please. Yes, so for the conclusion, the study found that the terms or the stigma itself recognizable among Indonesian EFL students, and the students also experience moderate level of speaking anxiety and concern about the peer judgment. And the findings suggest that social stigma may contribute to communication apprehension. Although its influence varies among students, fear of making mistakes remains the strongest concern. But peer judgment and negative labeling also play an important role in shaping students' willingness to communicate. So for the future research, as my suggestion, it is recommended to involve a larger sample size and participants from different universities. Future studies may also use qualitative interview to explore students' personal experience more deeply. A mixed method approach may also be useful to combine statistical findings with students' real stories. Next slide, please. All right, so here are the references that I use. And next slide, please. And thank you, slide. So this is the end of my presentation. To summarize the study, I would like to highlight that the stigma is more than just a casual joke. Okay, so it can become a social factor that influences students' confidence and willingness to speak in English. Therefore, English learning environment should encourage students to practice without fear and being judged. Thank you for all of your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right. So I have finished my own presentation, and now let us proceed to the third presentation. The third presenter is Enon, and to Enon, the time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity to present my proposal. My name is Enon.
Enon. Can you hear my voice? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Your voice is not audible enough. Can you speak a little bit louder?
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the opportunity to present my research proposal. My name is Enon. I would like to present my research. The title is The Impact of AI-Based Speaking Partners on Student English Speaking Confidence in a Classroom. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, the first is introduction. Speaking is one of the most important skills in learning English because it helps students communicate their ideas and opinion. However, it is also one of the most challenging skills as many EVL learners struggle with vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and self-confidence. In the Indonesian context, students have limited opportunities to practice speaking English, and classroom activities often focus more on grammar and written exercises than speaking practice. As a result, many students lack confidence when speaking English. Recently, AI-based speaking partners like ChatGPT, Alsa Speak, or another AI application have provided new opportunities for interactive speaking practice and immediate feedback. These tools allow students to practice speaking more frequently and independently. Although Previous studies have reported specific speaking performance aspect and learn characteristic is still limited. Therefore, this study investigates how AI-based speaking partners influence students' speaking performance, learners' characteristics, and the challenges they face during AI-assisted speaking practice. Next slide, please. Okay, the next is the research question. The research question, the first, there are to what extent do AI-based speaking partners contribute to the improvement of EVAL students' speaking confidence and speaking performance? The second, what factors and limitations influence the effectiveness of AI-based speaking partners in supporting EVAL students' speaking research? To investigate the contribution of AI-based speaking partners to eval students' speaking confidence and speaking performance. The second, to identify the factors and limitations that affect the effectiveness of AI-based speaking partners in eval speaking practice. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Okay, the next is literature review. The first, speaking confidence in ABL learning according to Bandura. Speaking confidence refers to learners' belief in their ability to communicate effectively in English. Sorry, before. In other words, it's how confident students feel when they speak English. Students with higher confidence are usually more motivated to participate in class discussion. The second, AI in language learning. AI has become an important tool in education. AI can support language learning by providing personalized learning experience, real-time feedback, and flexible opportunities for practice. AI applications allow students to practice English independently outside this classroom. The third, AI-based speaking partners. AI-based speaking partners are AI tools that can interact with learners through conversation. These tools provide speaking practice, pronunciation feedback, and a comfortable learning environment. According to Creation, emotional factors like anxiety, motivation, and confidence influence language learning. Students learn more effectively when they feel confident and experience low anxiety. According to Vygotsky, emphasized that interaction plays a key role in language development. Language learning occurs through communication and social interaction. Although AI is not human conversation partner, it still provides opportunities for learners to interact, practice speaking, receive feedback, and develop their communication. Next slide, please. The review of related studies, according to Lee and Su, Park and Kim and Aiden, that AI conversational tools help learners improve their fluency, pronunciation, speaking proficiency, and willingness to communicate in English. And that AI-assisted learning can reduce speaking anxiety and encourage students to practice activities. Although many studies have discussed the benefits of AI in language learning, most of them focus on speaking performance, pronunciation, fluency, or student general perception of AI. However, there are still limited studies that specifically investigate how AI-based speaking partners influence the speaking confidence of Indonesians. The conceptual framework is one that relationship between AI speaking partners and students speaking confidence. First, AI-based speaking provides students with more opportunities to practice speaking English anytime and anywhere. Through frequent practice, continuous feedback, students can identify using English. As students gain more experience and feel anxious about making mistakes. Next slide. The next is methodology. The study uses a quantitative descriptive design with a correlational approach to examine the relationship between the use of AI-based speaking partners and student speaking performance. The participants were 50 undergraduate students from the English Education Department who had experience using AI application like ChatGPT or another AI application. They were selected through random sampling. Data were collected through an online questionnaire using Google Form consisting of closed-ended question with a Likert scale and open-ended question. This study focused on speaking performance, including fluency, accuracy, pronunciation, and willingness to communicate, as well as other factors like motivation and speaking anxiety. The data were analyzed using descriptive statistic, correlation analysis, and semantic analysis to identify student experience, benefit, and challenging in using AI-based speaking partners. Next slide. Okay, the next is finding. Based on the finding, pronunciation was the aspect that showed the greatest improvement. This happened because AI application provide immediate feedback, allowing students to identify and correct their pronunciation mistake directly. Fluency also improved because students had more opportunities to practice speaking through continuous interaction with AI-based speaking partners. Another important finding is that student willingness to communicate increased since AI provides a non-judgment environment. Students felt less anxious about making mistakes and become more confident in speaking English. The study also found the motivation played an important role in the effectiveness of AI-assisted speaking practice. In Asian, students with different levels of English proficiency benefit from AI in different ways. Higher level students often use AI for more advanced professional conversation, while lower level students benefit more from pronunciation support. Next slide. Okay, the next is discussion. Based on the finding, AI-based speaking partners have a positive impact on ABL students' speaking development, particularly in pronunciation, fluency, and willingness to communicate. So, students reported that AI tools help them practice speaking more frequently and receive immediate feedback, especially on pronunciation errors. As a result, they become more fluent and more confident when speaking English. These findings are consistent with previous studies, which found that AI provides effective speaking practice, instant feedback, and continuous opportunities for interaction. Through regular practice with AI, students can improve their speaking skills in flexible and supportive environment. The finding also support to theory creation language learning is more effective when learner experience low anxiety and high confidence. In Asian, the finding which emphasize the importance of interaction in language learning. Although AI is not human and conversation partner, is still provide meaningful interaction through conversation. Next slide. Okay, the next is conclusion. In conclusion, AI-based speaking partners help enable students improve pronunciation, fluency, and confidence through instant feedback and interactive communication. They also reduce speaking anxiety and encourage more English practice outside the classroom. However, challenges such as speech recognition errors, technical issues, and less authentic interaction remain. Therefore, AI should be used as a supplementary tool alongside teacher and real-life communication activities. That's all for my presentation. Thank you for attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Enon, for the presentation. The explanation is well organized and help us understand the main points of the article. We also appreciate the way the research problem and discussion were presented academically. Right, next we will continue with the fourth presenter. The fourth presenter is Muhammad Ahsan Ramadhan. So to Muhammad Ahsan Ramadhan, please begin your presentation and time is yours.
Oke. Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank the moderator for this opportunity. And here I will present my research entitled Utilizing English Premier Language Commentary as Authentic Listening Material in EFL Classes. Next slide, please. Okay, the first is background of the study. Listening is a key skill in learning English. In EFL context, example Indonesia, listening is the most difficult skill, limited exposure to real English outside the classroom. Problems with classroom materials, the first is too slow and not natural, and the second is do not reflect real life communication. Challenges in real life listening, the first is fast speech, second informal expression, and the third is different accent. And the lowest to the motivation is materials are not interesting or relevant. For the solution, use authentic and engaging materials, example English Premier League commentary, and provide real, natural, and interesting English input. Next slide, please. And the next is problem identification. Two main problems identified. The first problem is listening comprehension. First, difficult understanding natural spoken English, and the second, fast speech is hard to follow. Difficulties with differences accent, words sound connected in real speech, used to slow, clear textbook audio. And the second problem is student motivation. Students feel bored during listening activities, material are not interesting or relevant, and low focus and participation. For the conclusion, both comprehension and motivation need improvement. Next slide, please. Okay, the next is research question. The first research question is difference in achievement. Is there a significant difference in listening comprehension and EPL commentary versus conventional materials? The second research question is extent of effect. How strong is the effect of EPL commentary? Measure the significance of the impact. The function of research question, the first is guide the direction of the study, and the second is determine data collection and analysis. Next slide, please. The next is research objective. The first research objective is effect of EPL commentary. Determine if it improves listening comprehension, and the second is comparison. Compare EPL commentary versus conventional materials and identify the more effective method. The third is magnitude of effect. Measure how strong the effect is statistically. Overall goal is provide clear and measurable results. Next slide, please. Okay, the next slide is conceptual framework. First is independent variable. EPL commentary as authentic listening material, natural speed, intonation, expression, and context. For the key factor is provide authentic input and increase students' motivation and engagement. For the process, better language processing, improve understanding of main ideas, specific information, and vocabulary. And dependent variable is students' listening comprehension achievement. Next slide, please. Okay, the next is research design. The first research design is quasi-experimental quantitative approach. Use existing classes, no random assignment. For groups, experimental group, EPL commentary, control group, conventional materials. And for the procedure, pre-test initial ability. The second is treatment, several meetings. The third is post-test after treatment. And the data analysis, first compare pre-test and post-test result between experimental and control groups. For the purpose is determine the effect of EPL commentary on listening comprehension. Next slide, please. Okay, for the population and sample, for population, it's English educational students and have basic English learning experience. For the sampling technique, cluster random sampling and select whole classes, not individual students. For the sample class selected, 30 students per course and total 60 students. For the group assignment, experimental group, EPL commentary, and control group, confessional materials. Next slide, please. Okay, for the research instrument, for main instrument is listening comprehension test, test format, 30 multiple choice question, skill assess, main idea, specific information, detailed information, simple inference, and vocabulary in context. Test for the test administration, it is pre-test before treatment and post-test after treatment. For supporting material is lesson plans and EPL commentary videos, experimental group. Next slide, please. Okay, for the research findings, both group complete a pre-test before the treatment. The experimental group scored a mean of 63.40, while the control group scored 62.87, indicating similar initial listening abilities. After treatment, the experimental group achieved a mean score of 82.13 compared to 72.27 for the control group. The experimental group improved by 18.73 points, while the control group improved by 9.40 points. These results suggest that using English Premier League match commentary was more effective in improved students' listening comprehension than conventional listening materials. Further analysis using an independent sample t-test was conducted to determine the statistical significance of this difference. Next slide, please. Okay, for the discussion, the findings indicate the EPL match commentary significantly improves student listening comprehension compared to conventional materials. This improvement is due to several factors. First, authentic language input. Students are exposed to natural pronunciation, fast speech, and real-life expressions. Higher motivation, familiarity with football increases students' interest and engagement. Audiovisual support. Watching much context helps students understand meaning more easily. Repeated exposure helps students adapt to fast speech and contextual vocabulary. These findings support Krashen input hypothesis and Mayer's multimodal learning theory, which emphasizes meaningful input and multimodal learning. Overall, EPL commentary is both statistically effective and pedagogically meaningful in improving listening skills. Next slide, please. For the next is conclusion. Based on the finding, it can be concluded that the use of English Premier League match commentary significantly improves students' listening comprehension achievements. Students who were taught using EPL commentary obtained higher post-test scores compared to those taught with several conventional listening materials. This result is supported by the independent sample t-test, which saw a significant difference between the two groups, and the effect size analysis, which indicate a large effect. Overall, the study confirms that authentic materials such as EPL commentary enhance students' motivation, engagement, and ability to understand natural spoken English. Next slide, please. Okay, for the suggestion is based on this result, several suggestions are made. English lecturers are encouraged to use authentic materials such as EPL commentary to make listening classes more engaging and contextual. Students are advised to practice listening independently using authentic sources like football commentary, podcasts, and news. Future researchers are suggested to conduct similar studies with larger samples or explore other types of authentic materials to expand this research. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, maybe that's all from me. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Ahsan Ramadan, for the presentation. And the presentation has provided a clear overview of the article and its academic relevance. So we do really appreciate the explanation and the effort in delivering the material. All right, so now we will move to the fifth semester. The fifth presenter, I'm so sorry. The fifth presenter is Putri Nadin. So, Putri Nadin, the time is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, wait. Okay. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for the moderator to opportunity to given to me today. So my name is Putri Nadin, and in this seminar proposal presentation, I would like to present my research entitled called The Role of Social Media Improving Student Speaking Confidence. So this study focuses on how social media platforms can support English language learners, especially increasing their confidence when speaking English. So I hope this presentation can provide a clear explanation of my research topic, objective, and the significance of the study. Okay. So first is the research background. For the background of this study, speaking is considered one of the most important skills in learning English. However, many students still experience difficulties when they are required to speak English, and particularly in EFL or English as a foreign language context, such as Indonesia. Students often feel nervous, afraid of making mistakes, and worried about being judged by others. These factors lead to low speaking confidence. At the same time, social media has become an inseparable part of student daily lives. Most students spend several hours every day using platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and former Twitter is now called X. Through these platforms, students are exposed to authentic English contents, including videos, podcasts, interviews, and daily conversations. And this phenomenon raises an important question. Can social media help students become more confident in speaking English? So based on this issue, this study investigates the roles of social media improving student speaking confidence. So the key issues identified in this research are first, students have low confidence in speaking English. They have limited opportunities to practice English. Then speaking anxiety remains a major challenge, and the research specifically focusing on speaking confidence still limited. Okay, next is the research problem. Based on the background, the main research question of the study is how does social media contribute improving students' speaking confidence in English language learning? To answer the main question, the several supporting questions are proposed. First, how frequently do students engage with English content on social media? And second, what benefits do students receive from using social media for language learning? Third, how does social media influence their confidence in speaking English? And finally, what challenges do students encounter while using social media as a learning tool? So these questions guide the research process and help to explore students' experience more deeply. Next is the research objective. The objective of the study is to explore the relationship between social media use and speaking confidence among EFL learners. More especially, the students. This study aims to examine the role of social media in English language learning, identify the benefits perceived by students, explore students' experience while using social media, and then discover challenges faced during the learning process. Through this objective, the study hopes to provide insights into how social media can support language learning beyond the classroom. Okay, so before discussing social media, it is important to understand EFL context. In Indonesia, English is learned as a foreign language rather than second language. This means English is mainly used inside the classroom and rarely used everyday communication. As a result, students often face several challenges. First, they have limited exposure to English itself, and second, they have limited opportunities to interact with using English, and third, many students have experienced speaking difficulties, and finally, these conditions often lead to confidence issues when speaking English. So, therefore, alternative learning environments are needed to provide additional exposure and practice opportunities. So, social media is no longer used only for entertainment. So, today, social media has evolved into a value educational tool that provides learners with authentic language exposure and interactive learning experience. Some social media platforms are particularly among students, including like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and X. This platform offer various types of English language content that can help students improve their listening skills, vocabulary, pronunciations, and communication abilities. Furthermore, students can access learning materials anytime and anywhere, making learning more flexible and engaging. Okay, speaking confidence refers to a learner belief in their ability to communicate effectively in English. Students who possess high English speaking confidence are generally more willing to participate in a classroom discussion, express their opinions, and interact with others using English. But on the other hand, students with low confidence often avoid speaking because they fear making mistakes or receiving negative judgments from peers. Confidence is an important factor because students who feel confident are more likely to practice speaking, and more practice usually leads to a better language development. So for the first finding, is increased language exposure. The findings indicate that social media significantly increases students' exposure to English. Students reported frequently watching English videos, listening to podcasts, and following interactional content creators. So this regularly exposure helps students become more familiar with pronunciation, vocabulary, and communication patterns used by native and proficient speakers. So as a result, the students gain authentic language input, better familiarity with English, improved understanding of language use, and increased confidence in communication. While in finding 2, students reported that social media helped them learn new vocabulary, improve pronunciation through repeated exposure of English content. Many participants mentioned that they often imitate content creators and use subtitles to connect spoken and written language. And this practice helped them understand expression more effectively and apply them in real communication. As a result, they have better pronunciation, richer vocabulary, and greater understanding of expressions and exposure to different English accents. And then in finding 3, many participants explained that social media creates a low-pressure learning environment. Unlike traditional classroom settings, students can practice privately without fear of immediate criticism. This flexibility allows students to repeat learning activities as many times as necessary until they feel comfortable. So in content, students experience that they have less fear of making mistakes, reduced anxiety, and more comfortable practice opportunities, and greater willingness to speak English. And finding 4, students reported that social media makes English more enjoyable because educational content is often combined with entertainment. So students can choose content based on their interests, making the learning experience more engaging and meaningful, which some popular interests like included music, gaming, travel, and lifestyle content. Because students enjoy the content, they spend more and more time interacting with English, which contributes positively to their confidence. And for the finding 5, the study found that social media promotes learner autonomy, meaning the students can take control of their own learning process. So the students are actually able to choose what they want to learn, select any learning materials, learn at their own pace, slowly by slowly, and monitor their own progress. So this independence helps students focus on the areas they need to improve and gradually build a greater confidence in speaking English. These findings of the study support several important theories. So first, question input hypothesis suggests that language acquisition occurs when learners receive meaningful, understandable language input. Second, social learning theory explains that learners acquire a knowledge by observing and imitating others. This can be seen when students imitate English-speaking content creators on social media. And third, Bandura's self-efficacy theory emphasizes that confidence influences as learners' willingness to communicate and participate in language activities. So therefore, the findings are constant with the established theories in language learning and educational psychology. And in conclusion, this study demonstrates that social media plays a positive role in improving students' speaking confidence. The findings to show that social media contributes into increased language exposure, pronunciation, and vocabulary development, reduce speaking anxiety, increase learning motivation, and independent learning habits. Therefore, social media can be considered as an effective supplementary tool for English language learning, particularly for FL learners who have limited opportunities to practice English in their real life situation. Okay, so that is all for my presentation. Thank you so much for your attention and participation. I sincerely really say thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much, Shelly, for the presentation, and your article was explained in a clear and coherent manner. And I do really appreciate your presentation, especially in showing the connection between the topic, the research method, and also the conclusion. All right, so next we will continue to the final presenter for the session. The sixth presenter is Marcel, Johan, Maurits, Nanany. So Marcel, please deliver your presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much for the moderator. Okay, good afternoon, Professor Dr. Syafrizal MPD, or respect lecturer for this course, and all my friends present here. My name is Marcel John Maurits Nanany, and today I will present my research entitled Exploring ChatGPT Use in Academic Reading and Critical Thinking. Okay, can you please next slide? Okay. First, let me explain the background of this study. Today, generative AI has changed the way students learn and read academic tasks. Many students now use tools like ChatGPT to help them understand difficult text, summarize article, and explain unfamiliar vocabulary. So this is especially relevant especially for English education students, because they often deal with long journal article, abstract theory, and difficult English terms. However, even though ChatGPT can help students, there is also a concern. If students depend it too much, they may read less and think less independently. Okay, so the main issue in this study is not just the use of AI, but how students actually experience in academic reading and critical thinking. Okay, next slide. Okay, so based on the background, the study focused on 4 research questions. The first question is how students use ChatGPT in academic reading tests, especially for summaries, interpreting, and understanding vocabulary. The second question is how students perceive ChatGPT in shaping the reading interests and habits. The third question is how students experience ChatGPT in their critical thinking process. And the fourth question is what challenges appear when students use ChatGPT for academic purpose. Okay, so these 4 questions help the study look at both the benefit and the risk of ChatGPT in student learning. Okay, next slide. We are jump into literature framework. In this study, ChatGPT is seen as a kind of scaffolding. Scaffolding means it gives temporary support when students are facing difficult tests that they cannot fully do on their own yet. Okay, according to law in 2024, generative AI can support language learning in a helpful way, especially when students need guidance to deal with difficult academic tasks. At the same time, this study also connects ChatGPT with academic literacy. But Baldrige et al. In 2025 show that AI is closely related to reading and writing practice in higher education. Academic literacy is not just about reading words, but also about understanding the meanings. evaluating claim, and building our own presentation. So in this study, ChatGPT is not seen as completely good or completely bad. Its effect depends on how students use to it. If they use it as a bridge to understanding, it can support their learning. But if they use it as shortcut, it may replace reading effort and independent thinking. That is why responsibility is important. Students still need to read the original text, compare the answer with lecturer, material, or other sources, and then decide whether response is correct. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now I will explain the research methodology. The study used qualitative case study design because the goal is to understand student experience and deep and not to measure the numbers. Okay, so the participant, as you see, are 4 English education from 2023 cohort with 1 student from each class A, B, C, and D. The data will collect through open-ended questionnaire, semi-structured interview, through WhatsApp chat and documentation. Then the data were analyzed through data condensation, data display, and conclusion drawing. To protect their privacy, the participants are called as P1, P2, P3, and P4. Okay. Can you please next slide? Okay. From the finding, ChatGPT they reading academic text. First one, it helps them identify the main idea. And second, it helps explain difficult vocabulary and academic terms. Third, it simplifies long and complex sentence. And fourth, it helps students summarize journal or article that make difficult text to easier understand. Please next slide. And next, this study also shows that ChatGPT affects student reading interests and habits in different ways. For some students, ChatGPT make academic reading feel less intimidating because they know how help is available when the text is too difficult. But for the other student, their reading interest still depend on things like the topic, the assignment, and their personal motivation. So another interesting point is that ChatGPT helps students read more strategically. For example, they focus more on the abstract, introduction, findings, and conclusion. So ChatGPT does not automatically increase reading interest, but it can make reading easier to start and easier to manage the reading. Okay, next slide. In the critical thinking process, ChatGPT also gives some support. It helps students to develop their idea, compare concept, and build a argument. Some students use ChatGPT like a discussion partner, where they getting to starting a point, then improve it with their own idea. But the important part is this: critical thinking does not come from ChatGPT alone. It comes from how students check, compare, and judge the answer. That is why verification is very, very important. Students still need to compare ChatGPT response with the original text, lecturer, material, and their own understanding. Okay. Please next slide to challenge and raise. Of course, there are also several challenges and risks. The first challenge is inaccuracy. Sometimes ChatGPT gives some answers that sound confident but do not fully match with the original text. The second is generalization. Some answers are too broad and not very specific enough. The third is prompt difficulty. If students ask an unclear question, they may get confused with the answer they get. And the last one is dependency. This is the big risk because students may start asking ChatGPT before they trying to think independently. So this study shows that ChatGPT is useful but still needs careful use and personal responsibility. Okay, we are jump into the responsibility. Please next slide. And this is the one of the most important point of the whole study. The main message is the students should not use ChatGPT first and think later. The better order is to read the source first, then ask ChatGPT for clarification of something is still unclear. This is important because critical thinking does not grow from ChatGPT itself. It grows from the way student question, compare, and verify the response. So responsibility means students stay active in the process and they should not let AI do all the work. They need to keep reading, keep checking, and judging by themselves. Okay, please next slide. Okay, for the conclusion, this study shows that ChatGPT can support students in academic reading and critical thinking, especially when they face difficult English texts. It can help students understand main idea, explain vocabulary, simplify text, and develop their idea. However, it should not replace students' own reading, analysis, and judgment. And the most important is the ChatGPT should be used responsibly, not passively. Okay, that's all for my presentation today. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much, Marcel, for your presentation. So your explanation was already delivered clearly and academically, and I appreciate the way the article is presented and also the key points that you were highlighted. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, all presenters in room A have now completed their presentation. And based on today's session, we have listened to several academic article presentations from the members of Class C, room A. Each presenter has delivered their topic, research background, methodology, findings, and conclusion in a structured way. And through this session, we can see that academic article presentation is not only about presenting research results, but also about communicating ideas clearly, critically, and responsibly. And the session also reminds us that academic research plays an important role in developing knowledge, especially in the field of English language teaching. Each article presented today has contributed to our understanding in different issues related to language learning, teaching, and student experiences, classroom interaction, and the other relevant academic concern. All right, so on behalf of the session, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to our lecturer for the guidance and opportunity given to us. I would like also to thank all the presenters for their preparation and participation. Your presentation have shown good academic effort and commitment. I also thank all participants for paying attention and supporting today's session from the beginning until the end. And to close this seminar, let us express our gratitude once again for the smooth running of today's presentation session. Thank you very much for your attention. Good afternoon, everyone, and have a great day.